Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Season 2 of the Logical Christian Podcast. I'm your Logical Christian, Dan Irwin. Welcome to those who are here for the first time, and a hearty welcome back to the LCP faithful. What we do here is look at what the mainstream media feels is important to tell us about current events, politics, science, religion, and just about anything else, but we're not interested in their spin. We want to look at these stories logically, and we especially want to look at these stories as Christians. Links can be found in the show notes if you'd like to follow along. So with that, let's go be logical Christians. Just a quick programming note. I just want to apologize for the randomness in dropping episodes lately. Unfortunately, I don't really see it letting up anytime soon. With warmer weather, sort of here, projects, repairs, etc. need to be done. I foresee some days or weeks of long hours related to work things as well, and then generally life makes it hard to keep that consistent schedule. I'll do my best. Some weeks will be better than others, and we'll see what I can do. Hopefully, the content is worth a little inconsistency, enough that you'll hang with me. And thanks for listening. Now, on with the show. If you've ever been in one of those arguments, you know the feeling of having the door slammed in your face and hearing the click as the door is locked. This could also apply if you've ever tried to sell something door to door, or if you're 3 seconds past closing time at that store, hoping they'll let you in. There's a very specific feeling when the door is closed or slammed in your face and locked. You're out. You're not welcome. You don't belong. Well, that door can be literal, as in my examples, or figurative, as in socialist or Democrat policies. The idea of slamming the door in your face is a favorite tool of the left. Attain power, control, status, wealth through policies and laws, then slam that sucker shut before anyone else can get in there and threaten your little fiefdom. On today's episode, first we're going to make an interesting connection, and then I'll exercise remarkable restraint. Then after the bumper music, goal update number 14, this time with a special guest. So grab your corkboard and get out your thumbtacks and string, and get ready to be amazed, because you ain't gotta go home, but you can't stay. Here we go. It's likely you were told as a kid to work hard in school, to do your best, to never give up. If you push and dig and get good grades, there was just nothing you couldn't do. Now maybe that's a little over the top, a little too Leave It to Beaver-ish. I wasn't told things like that, but I was given expectations for grades, for getting a job. I was more realistic with my kid about grades and potential. I mean, let's be honest, there is nobody out there that can be anything they want to be. Everyone has limitations somewhere. But I think we were all likely given the same kind of message, whether it came from parents or teachers or whoever. If you work hard, no matter what you do, you can make a living wage, you can provide for yourself, for a family, maybe in addition to a place to live in a car, you can have a little extra, take a vacation or two. If you listen to Dave Ramsey or his ilk, you'll be avoiding debt, using actual money to purchase things, saving up a nest egg for retirement. And I know that Ramsey would probably separate my head from my shoulders for this, but we all know that in the real world, for most of us, maintaining a solid credit score is the key to getting good rates on mortgages, loans, credit cards, if you so choose. Additionally, very often, your credit score will be used when trying to rent a place to live or possibly to obtain insurance, and even in some cases when being considered for employment. Although Dave believes the ultimate is to have no credit score, not a low or a zero, just a no score. It just doesn't exist because you've paid cash for everything for so long that nothing you've done would ping the credit agencies. And although I agree that that would be a wonderful place to be, as he said before, having enough money to purchase the apartment building that you can't rent in because you don't have a credit score. I think for most of us, the reality is that we're going to have a score. So if we're going to have a score, we definitely want to have a good score. In fact, various government agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Federal Trade Commission, and trusted organizations like Forbes and NerdWallet, they all say that you absolutely want to have a good to a great credit score. That's why things like Credit Karma exist, so you can do a soft check of your score on a regular basis. A good score just makes things move along easier in the world in which we live. In fact, it makes things work so much better for you that there are companies, an entire industry, some reputable, some not so reputable, focused on helping you repair your credit if you've totally screwed everything up. And there are ways to pull your credit score out of the tank over time if you've had to declare bankruptcy. But all that's old think. Remember, we're not so much capitalist or democratic, as in a democracy, not as in the demonic leftist party. Now we're more socialistic, meaning that from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. See, if you make more money than someone else, well, clearly they need some of that money, and you have too much. And if you're someone that's making over a certain dollar amount every year, let's just say, $10 million, well, how much do you really need? Maybe every dollar over that needs to be redistributed through the government, right? Maybe you wanting to have a life of ease and retirement when others are just getting by on government assistance is just you being greedy, and you might need some help to understand and maybe to remedy that problem that you've got. Now, we all understand, whether we like it or not, that the more money we make, the more our illustrious government overlords, through the totally pristine infernal revenue system, takes from us. So they can fund all of the wonderful things that they do. Yeah, the 16th Amendment should be repealed, just saying. And normally this would be where this ends. Just work hard, use cash, save your money, make wise choices, know that your government wants their cut, and try to make it through the financial side of your life as cleanly as you can. The rules of the game are set. They're clear, they're well-defined. Regardless of if we agree with it all or not, at least we know that personally we want this, we don't want that. But now, found on the WashingtonTimes.com, headline, Biden to hike payments for good credit homebuyers to subsidize high-risk mortgages. So going into effect on May 1st, like in just a few days from now, a, quote, new federal rule forcing homebuyers with good credit scores to pay higher mortgage rates and fees to subsidize people with riskier credit ratings who are also in the market to buy houses. Now, I know that there was likely nobody alive today that can remember all the way back to 2008 and the housing bubble collapse, but the lesson that we thought was learned was that giving big old loans with big old payments to people with little to no money and a poor record of paying back debt and little to no skin in the game was a poor, or at least a suboptimal banking decision. It's a decision that ends with the banks owning a lot of houses, the market collapsing, the economy tanking for a while, which shockingly hurts all of us. Well, I mean, not the elites. They come out okay. So starting May 1st, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will enact the, get this, LLPAs, the loan level price adjustments. Doesn't that sound nice? Level price adjustments. Yeah. Remember the difference between equality and equity? I've mentioned it a few times. Equality means everyone has the same basic opportunities and can do as they will with those opportunities, including squander them and make a hash of your life. Equity means that it doesn't matter what everyone does with those opportunities. The end result must be the same. Level price adjustment, leveling them out, that's equity. That's socialism, my friends. The example given in this article is, quote, mortgage industry specialists say homebuyers with credit scores of 680 or higher will pay, for example, about $40 per month more on a home loan of $400,000. Homebuyers who make down payments of 15 to 20% will get socked with the largest fees. Now, I don't know what your credit score is, and I realize that we're all in different spots in life, but 680, it's not that great. Now, credit scores are typically in a range of 300 to 850. They're affected by a variety of things, some being more important than others, but factors include your payment history. Did you make all your payments and did you make them on time? Credit utilization. How much of your available credit are you using? There's kind of a tipping point where you're using too much of your available credit, but if you use none of your available credit, your score can also drop a little bit as well from that. Derogatory marks. Do you have any collections, any tax liens, bankruptcies, etc. on your record? Any are bad, multiple are very bad. Credit age. The older the average age of your credit lines, the better. It shows stability. Total accounts. How many open and closed accounts do you have? Like with credit utilization, there's a tipping point where you just have too many. And then hard inquiries. Anytime you apply for a loan, anytime you apply for that department store or home improvement store credit card in order to save 20%, you get a hard inquiry on your credit report. The more inquiries you have, the worse it is, since it shows that you appear to be hunting for more credit. Of course, There are time limits to this data, 3 years for some, 7 years for other, at which point the data rolls off and the credit score can shift. So what does a 680 mean? Well, keep in mind that each lender has freedom to decide what scores they'll lend to and what scores they won't. They also have freedom to decide what scores get what rates. But in general, according to FICO, the ranges are 300 to 579 is very poor. If you can find anyone to lend to you with a score like this, you're going to be screwed 6 ways to Sunday if you take what they offer. 580 to 669 is considered to be fair. Generally, you're going to get horrible credit terms, again, if you can find someone to loan to you. 670 to 739 is considered good. You shouldn't have a problem obtaining a credit line, but you're going to have fairly poor terms. Excessively high interest rates typically is where you'll see this. And 740 to 799 is very good, and 800 to 850 is excellent. This likely means you don't have many existing lines of credit, that your debt-to-income ratio is small to reasonable, so you won't have a problem being approved, and you'll get very good to the best rates being offered. So 680 is just barely into the good range. In other words, what Biden's administration has done is force people that are already struggling, as that's what a 680 really is, to pay more for people that are struggling even more. This is akin to the lie that Biden told about no new taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. Regardless of his administration, and I don't say him because he's a vegetable, regardless of raised income taxes or not, inflation alone, which in fairness, based on the spending policies of every recentish president, accelerated by the massive spending by Trump, but forced into overload by the Biden White House policies, that has been a new excessive tax on absolutely everyone. So this little program stating good credit home buyers implies people that are much higher than a barely into the good range with a 680 credit score, but no, again, these policies affect everyone, especially those struggling the most. And not only credit score garbage, but if you've been responsible saving your money for a down payment, a solid down payment, you're going to be penalized for that as well, apparently through increased interest rates. The article says, quote, "The changes do not make sense. Penalizing borrowers with larger down payments and credit scores will not go over well," Ian Wright, a senior loan officer at Bay Equity Home Loans in the San Francisco Bay Area, told the Washington Times in an email message. "It overcomplicates things for consumers during a process that can already feel overwhelming with the amount of paperwork, jargon, etc. Confusing the borrower is never a good thing." He said the rule will cause customer service issues for lenders and individual loan officers when a consumer won't understand why their interest rate and fees suddenly changed. "I am all for the first-time buyer having a chance to get into the market, but it's clear these decisions aren't being made by folks that understand the entire mortgage process," Mr. Wright said. And that pretty much sums up the Biden Kremlin. I mean, the Biden White House. Nobody has any idea what they're doing or why. We have a Supreme Court justice chosen based on color of skin and type of genitals, and an education secretary chosen based on ethnicity that can't define what a woman is. We have a transportation secretary chosen based on lifestyle choice and preferred partner genitals that doesn't know what he's doing, as planes can't fly, but trains sure can. And his focus is that he's pretty sure everything is racist or homophobic. We have Biden's FFA administrator nominee chosen based on skin color that doesn't know the first thing about aeroplanes or aviation in general. We have a press secretary in her position only because she's black, has a vagina, and prefers her partner to also have a vagina. She only knows what's written for her in her big book of stupid. We have an ATF director, and I have no idea how this Whitey McWhiteface got in here. He's Jewish, but that couldn't be a positive in the eyes of Biden's overlords, unless he's a Soros-style Jew, in which case, perfect. Anyway, he can't define what a so-called assault rifle is. He's the ATF director, because he doesn't know a whole lot about guns. We have a bitter old grandma, Merrick Garland, chosen because of his spiteful, murderous grudge against Trump and the right wing, serving as our attorney general, who has no idea what's going on, but knows that it's those right-wing Christians that are doing it. We had a troll who should be in prison at best right now, heading up our National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Anthony the Science Fauci, who has a memory and a wealth of knowledge rivaled by no one, Except for that darned info on how much he gave China for gain-of-function research. If he could only remember anything at all about that topic. I mean, need I go on? The Biden administration is either the most incompetent group of people ever assembled, or they're just simply not afraid to lie to Congress under oath, or not, either way, or to you and I and the American people, their employers. Because promoting the agenda and advancing the cause is of the utmost importance. Or maybe they're just dumber than a sack of hammers. I don't know. Personally, I believe that it's all three of those things. They're borderline short bus. I know. And they believe that what they've been told to think is correct without doing any of their own research or any of their own thinking. And they've been told to believe things that are important to them, so they'll lie, cheat, steal, and kill in order to do those things that they were told in order to meet their target. But look, not everyone buys a house or takes out a mortgage. I mean, they're trying to shove everyone into a house right now for some reason, though. Why? I don't know. If I were a betting man, and I'm not, ever since the incident, I'd bet that they're trying to force mass default, which would then make the government, through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, or Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac, or whatever, it would make the government the largest private property owner in the country, which would also create yet another massive banking and economic collapse, allowing the government to step in and rescue the economy through taking over both the banks and private property, and then the takeover of our entire system is complete. The government can then ensure we all have a minimum income. They can provide housing to everyone, which helps meet the World Economic Forum's goal of you and I and all humanity having no private property by the year 2030 and being ever so happy about it. Anyway, a little off track there. No, I probably didn't digress. However, so since not everyone takes out a mortgage, we must have other ways of redistributing wealth and bringing about equity. You know what nearly all people use? Utilities. Power, electricity, right? Found on KTLA.com headline, California power companies roll out fixed rate bill proposal. Oh, this sounds great, especially in California. So the premise behind this proposal is summed up by the first one-sentence paragraph of the article. Quote, if you earn more, you pay more. Wonderful, wunderbar. Apparently, Southern California Edison, Pacific Gas and Electric, and San Diego Gas and Electric, the largest three power companies in California, proposed the idea to the California Public Utilities Commission in early April. The proposal is trying to follow a bill from 2022 that requires some sort of a fixed-rate utility charge system and simpler power bills. So the proposal is to lower the cost per kilowatt hour for everyone, but then tack on a fixed fee based on your income. If you make less than $28,000 a year, first of all, how are you living in California? But then you tack on $24 per month onto your bill. $28,000 to $69,000 a year, you add $34 per month. $69,000 to $180,000 per year, you add $73 per month. And those making over $180,000 per year will add $128 per month to their bill. Now, they say that this will lower the bills for everyone and that bill relief for customers is what they're shooting for. The CEO of San Diego Gas and Electric said, quote, when we were putting together the reform proposal, front and center in our mind were customers who live paycheck to paycheck, who struggle to pay for essentials such as energy, housing, and food. To which I'd say, what? That's not what a business does, or at least not what it should do. A business must ensure customer service and profitability. Now, that may sound cold, but if you're not profitable, you're not an existing business for very long. Now, I have no problem with utility companies being regulated from plundering the citizenry, but trying to ensure everyone is, doing okay, that's not their job. Looking at some numbers from California, we see that the average income per household is over $111,000 per year, while the median, the middle income, comes in at just under $79,000 per year. In fact, in 2020, there would only be about 20% of Californian households that would pay the smallest tacked-on charge, maybe another 20 or so percent paying the next level, about 40% paying the second from highest added-on flat rate, and about 20% paying the highest fee. And that's what this added fee is geared toward, getting money from those evil rich, that's 60%, and giving it to the 40%, essentially. Now, I know they proposed lowering rates for actual usage, and that's mighty fine of them, but how long before those rates shoot back up? especially since the country, and California even more so, is pushing to go all-electric everything by like next Thursday. These power companies won't be able to make a profit, so either they go bankrupt, which isn't a real solid option for a massive utility provider, or they jack the rates up, which is exactly what they try to do at first. Of course, this has to be approved by the state, who wouldn't approve what would be needed in order for them to stay solvent, or they become, once again, government-owned and run. Are we sensing a pattern here? This is all being done under the guise of equity, of social justice. We just want to be fair, and we don't want to leave a man behind, right? Now we, you and I, not them so much, we know that Jesus said, we'll always have the poor among us. And we know that there are basically two types of poor. Those that are lazy and choose poverty by their actions or inactions, and those that are poor because of legitimate circumstances that have culminated into a temporary state of poverty. We know that for the lazy, we should be motivating them to get back to work. You don't work, you don't eat. We know that for those that are down on their luck, we help them get back on their feet because that's where they want to be anyway, so we give them a hand. The social justice movement is absolutely counter to anything we learn in the Bible. In fact, the government really shouldn't have anything to do with helping suffering humanity at all. They should be protecting our freedoms and rights for us to help each other. Now, I've mentioned before that if all Protestants and Catholics were to give 10% of their income to the church, we could literally eliminate all government-run social backstops and supplemental programs. The church, or even more broadly stated, just charitable organizations, could easily handle the economic woes and could more adequately handle the social, physical, mental, and spiritual issues as well. But because the government stepped in and took those things over, because people either believe they can't give or that the church is just trying to get their money, and because we see the charlatans bilking people out of money in the name of religion, and we don't give. Although, as I've stated before, I don't believe that tithing is a New Testament command, I do believe we are commanded to give as our hearts dictate. And although this is a broad generalization, and there are some who literally can't and some who shouldn't until they get their debt in order, 10% is a good place to start. That said, regardless of your view on this, it's estimated that only about 5% of churchgoers actually tithe. But this isn't the real goal. I mean, if you seriously think that our government overlords, that any of the global elite are just trying their best to help those who are hurting, and the only way they can think to do that, to float all boats, to rescue the perishing and care for the dying, is equity through wealth redistribution? Oh, well, I've got some just beautiful oceanfront property right here in West Virginia to sell you. Just close your eyes. Can't you smell the salty spray? Oh. No, this is nothing but a ruse in order to gain more power and more control. Remember, the World Economic Forum said that by 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. That means property, homes, cars, and any other kind of substantial property. This is why, when discussing the near-term future in the 2030 to 2035 timeframe, as fate would have it, regarding a world of electric vehicles and electric everything, the questions about electrical generation capability, transmission line capacity, brownouts, blackouts, excessive heat or cold, acts of God, the excessive cost of EVs, the massive amount of time to recharge, the very limited range, and the relative non-existence of charging stations all go unanswered. And they don't need to answer them. They don't want to answer them. The answer is, we don't plan on everyone owning, let alone driving cars. We don't plan on electrical stability. We don't plan on massive interconnected grids. We don't plan on this many people. You'll live in small communities and be able to walk, bike, or take public transport, so don't worry about it. Regarding housing, homes or apartments or cells will be owned as public housing, rented to us or granted to us as part of our employment or existence. Employment itself and food, income, utilities, all of those will be distributed according to our need, according to our social standing, and according to our ability to contribute to society, to the common good. I know, this sounds like a dystopian future world type of movie. And so I know that some believe we're right on the edge of Jesus coming back, and the final act foretold in the Bible being set in motion, and this is just the one world government, and digital currency is how they'll get us, and an implanted microchip will be the mark of the beast injected into all of us, willing or not, through the use of a barely tested government-mandated chemical injection that Webster's dictionary is scrambling to redefine as a vaccine. I don't happen to think any of that personally. I just don't think we're that close yet. I know that's probably not the popular view among Christians, and trust me, I'm at or rapidly coming to a point in my life where I'm thinking, come Lord Jesus. But I just don't think we're at that point yet. Of course, you have those in the New Apostolic Reformation, the NAR, as well as other charismatic sects that believe in what's called the Seven Mountain Mandate, a completely erroneous belief that Christians are called to take dominion of the 7 areas of humanity: education, religion, family, business, government, arts and entertainment, and media. Once we Christians take ownership of all areas, the resulting peace will usher in the second coming. Well, I don't think there's any biblical backing for that belief. In fact, I believe the Bible says quite the opposite will happen. We're not in a period of increasing wonderfulness to allow Jesus to just come in and assume his throne. We're in a state of entropy, chaos, and decay where Jesus, the warrior king, will come back and make things right. We also have a number of people that tell us that if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. That's one that Glenn Beck likes to use. He also likes the idea that somehow the United States, although I agree was founded by many Christians and was founded with and on a Christian background, the idea that somehow we have a covenant with God as a nation that we just need to rekindle. We don't have a covenant with God. We humans can make promises all we want. Good luck with those. But a covenant with God has to be done by God and sealed by God. I don't believe that was ever the case with the United States. This country was created for such a time as this. Our time may be over or maybe not, but that's up to God, how he has chosen to use this nation for his ultimate purpose and his glory. Turning back to God, repenting, begging for him to relent and heal our land, well, I mean, it's a nice sentiment. But that wasn't a promise made to the United States, and it wasn't made for our time. Now, God could do that. That's totally up to his grand plan, and there's nothing wrong with praying for that. But that passage, very cleanly and neatly lifted out of Scripture, out of context, as we're very wont to do, is just not directly applicable to us. In fact, we have no idea how bad this country is going to get. We experience a little turmoil, a loss of peace, prosperity, and general happiness in the United States, and we've all got backpacks packed with an extra pair of underwear, a couple juice boxes baggy full of Cheerios, and our favorite toy, looking to the sky because it must be any second now. My life is poo-poo. That's got to be a sign, right? I do believe that we are currently living in the last days, as every day since Jesus ascended back into heaven, as witnessed by the apostles, has technically been the last days, and is literally what the Bible is referring to when speaking of the last days. I also believe that not only modern technology, but all things have been and are leading to a one-world government and the Antichrist and the beast and the second coming. When I was a kid, it was the UPC barcode. That was going to be the mark of the beast. Well, that's laughable today, because today we know it's a microchip, and even more so, we know it'll be deceptively injected into us, and then we're stuck. And maybe some of these advancements, some of these political moves will be used whenever that time comes, or maybe it'll be things that we haven't even heard of or thought of yet. But it won't be deceptive. It won't be a gotcha moment. Those taking the mark, whatever it is, will absolutely know and understand that they're pledging allegiance to this one world leader and claimed deity of some sort. Now, I wouldn't walk around with your head and heart in the clouds just waiting for your body to be delivered. I wouldn't give up on this country or this world yet. We've got a job to do still. The sign that Jesus is coming back will be when Jesus has come back. Until then, we need to have our houses and lives in order, and that's an impossible task in itself, and help show others the truth of the Bible, the gospel message, and the hope of salvation. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right. Social justice, specifically wealth redistribution, is literally the mark of the beast. I think that's what we should take from this. Well, welcome back to the American Genesis. This is episode 35, part 17, in our look at the amendments to the Constitution. I don't normally jump in like that, not right away, but I literally don't know how to kick this episode off. I'm reading slogans and quotes, and I've got something snarky and I think fairly funny to say about all of them, but I'll be honest, I'm afraid to say them. So the fact that I can think of snappy retorts and witty comments displays that I have a specific intelligence. The fact that I won't say them shows I have wisdom. The fact that I'll probably say some of them shows that I lack self-control. But let's get started so I can get the poor choices out of the way, shall we? In the last episode, we looked at the 18th Amendment, the theory that the government could literally mandate a dry country. That went over like a lead balloon, or at least at this point, it's still going over. It's pretty much just an instant failure. Less than 6 months after that amendment was ratified by the required number of states, the 19th Amendment was passed in the House and the Senate and sent to the states for ratification. As we do, let's start with the text. Quote, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation." So this is pretty straightforward, right? It was passed through Congress and sent to the states on June 4th, 1919. It took just under 1.25 years to be ratified. 36 states were needed for ratification at this time. Just over a third of those had signed off on it by the end of July, those being Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Kansas, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Texas, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, and Montana. Then it took until August 18th, 1920 before the remaining 23 required states ratified it, likely because they were misogynistic and sexist and patriarchal and big duty heads. Interestingly enough, as I've done with many of the past amendments, let's look at the slacker states, shall we? Delaware rejected the proposed amendment in June of 1920, but was finally nagged into approving it on March 6, 1923. Maryland rejected it in February of 1920, but then ratified it in March of 1941. But, and I have no idea nor a desire to know what this means, they didn't certify it until 1958. Virginia rejected it in February of 1920, then ratified it in 1952. Alabama rejected it earlier, September 1919, then ratified it in September of 1953. Florida ratified it in May of 1969. South Carolina rejected it in January of 1920, then ratified it in July of 1969, but again, didn't certify it until August of 1973. Georgia rejected it in July of 1919, then ratified it in February of 1970. Louisiana rejected it in July of 1920, then ratified it in June of 1970. North Carolina ratified it in May of 1971, and Mississippi rejected it in March of 1920, then ratified it, and hold on to your butts here, March of 1984. Fine, women can vote, whatever. Just quit harping at me. I think that's probably what they said. I find it very interesting that this one was outright rejected by so many states. This is the largest number of rejections of any amendment to date. But I also find it interesting that the concept of levels of intersectionality or hierarchy was alive and well even at this time, 150 years ago. If we go back 50 years prior to the 19th Amendment, we get to the 15th Amendment, which is the one that in 1870 gave blacks, or more accurately, all ethnicities and all colors, whether previously enslaved or not, the right to vote. In that case, there were 8 rejections and 1 rescission, but 11 fewer states as opposed to the 9 rejections for the 19th. So I guess the 15th was probably more strongly rejected, but not by much. Apparently, the idea of expanding rights isn't or wasn't a real popular position to take. But to my point, blacks, former slaves, people who were considered not only lower on the evolutionary scale, but considered to be something less than human, not even worthy of basic human dignity, they were given the right to vote, the men, obviously, 50 years before women, or even just white women, in keeping with the times, before they were granted the right to vote. What does that say to how women were viewed? Well, before you jump on the feminist bandwagon, as it runs directly over a curb, let's think about this for a minute. Was this misogyny? Was this the patriarchy trying to keep women down? Yeah, probably in some cases, but definitely not for all. So let's back up, take a look at a little history first. So prior to declaring independence, some women in some of the colonies had the right to vote. That said, voting was kind of haphazard and it really wasn't utilized that much. A lot of appointments were done by the king or appointments by people who were appointed by the king. And those that were actually voted in were really not overly powerful individuals. They really weren't beholden to the people. So yeah, although it's stated accurately that women in some colonies had the right to vote, that right to vote didn't mean much for anyone, really. Now, after the Revolution and the Constitution, the states were allowed to determine who could or couldn't vote. Now, only New Jersey maintained the right for women property owners to vote for a few years, but eventually eliminated that and did what every other state did. White males, 21 years or older, generally property owners, although there were a number of variations as to the requirements between states. In fact, the only voter mandate in the Constitution prior to the 15th Amendment was the 14th Amendment, which was made law in July of 1868, which said that as long as there were no disqualifications as defined in the amendment, a state could not deny male citizens 21 years old or older the right to vote. Of course, the Democrats South found ways to skirt around this to still exclude blacks, so then the 15th Amendment came into play to say you can't exclude someone based on ethnicity or color of skin either. But neither of these amendments nor anything else in the Constitution said women couldn't vote. It was left up to the states. They all decided that women couldn't vote. But only sort of. See, voting was heavily based on either property ownership or those that pay taxes or both. Women, by and large, did neither of these things at the time or weren't allowed to do these at the time. Now, was this because of the patriarchy? I'd argue probably not really. It actually, to me at least, appears to be more biblically based than anything else. The Bible, read correctly, lays out a complementarian relationship between men and women. Men are the head, women are submissive. Again, this isn't patriarchal, this is biblical. You got a problem with it? I suggest you tell God where he screwed up. But submissive doesn't mean enslaved, and to be honest, if men were to follow their biblical mandate, it would make it much easier for women to follow theirs. Although sin makes it impossible for men or women to follow their God-given mandate perfectly, if men would strive to run households, marriages, businesses, governments, as if they were representatives of Christ, as they're supposed to, then women, I think, could feel confident with men doing their job and would be more than happy, for lack of a better term, to allow men to be the head, as they're supposed to. But as God told Eve, your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. So, a conflict with the God-mandated complementarian relationship was born out of original sin. Now, as we move into the early American history, we have men that are not doing their job, we have divorce, we have distrust, we have women that have chosen not to marry, the idea of women owning property and those that own property prior to marriage retaining rights to their property after marriage, the idea of prenups and divorce decrees came into being, and we see a fight for women to be equal in the eyes of the law with regard to property ownership. Likewise, more women were working, some out of necessity, some out of desire, so they were paying taxes as well. The outcome of women owning property and paying taxes would naturally be equality in voting. The women's suffrage movement existed from colonial America and started really kicking in gear into the mid to late 1800s. By 1900, every state had given women substantial property rights, less so regarding finances, and some voting rights, specifically for president in some states. And then World War I happened. As the men marched off to war, the women backfilled the jobs that had been done by men in order to keep the country and the war effort going. This gave the various suffrage movements a push to demand of Congress and the president and the American population at large to give women a constitutional right to vote. A try at getting an amendment passed was overwhelmingly voted down in 1878. At that time, Wyoming was the only state that had voted in women's suffrage. By 1914, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Washington, California, Arizona, Kansas, Oregon, Montana, and Nevada had joined Wyoming in granting women's suffrage. Another attempt at a constitutional amendment was tried in 1914, and this time narrowly missed getting a majority of votes in the House. But remember, a two-thirds majority was needed, so it was voted down by a fairly large margin. I'd like to point out that at this time, the Democrats controlled the House, 291 to 134 seats. They also couldn't get a simple majority in the Senate, which was just slightly Democrat-controlled at 47 Democrats to 45 Republicans. So, just as with the rights given to blacks, it was the Democrats that wanted to slam the door in the face of anyone and everyone that they didn't want to play in their playpen. Woodrow Wilson, one of the worst, most racist, nastiest presidents this country has ever had, was also not real hot on women's suffrage. Now, publicly, it appeared that he was generally on board with the movement, because he was a politician, and he had an election in 1916, and then after making it through that, a pretty tough midterm election shaping up for 1918. Well, by 1918, New York, Michigan, Oklahoma, and South Dakota jumped on board with women's suffrage in their states. So now 15 states had women voting, at least to some degree, and Woodrow knew that he couldn't just blow this off. He had to play his cards a little bit more correctly. Between January 1918 and June 1919, the House and the Senate voted on this amendment to grant women the right to vote 5 times, each one being very close, but failing because Southern Democrats kept voting it down. After the 1918 midterm election, the Republicans held the House 240 to 192 seats and also held the Senate 49 to 47. Under pressure, Wilson called a special summer session to continue to address this amendment proposal. In May of 1919, it passed the House by a vote of 304 to 89. This included 200 Republicans for, 14 against, and 26 non-votes, which means that 104 Democrats joined them, seeing the writing on the wall, 75 voted against, and 13 opted not to vote. It was then brought before the Senate, and the Southern Democrats decided to filibuster the vote. Well, they also saw the writing on the wall and shortly abandoned their filibuster, finally allowing the vote. This vote passed the amendment with 56 for, 25 against, and 14 not voting. Again, the breakdown, this included 36 Republicans and 20 Democrats for, 8 Republicans and 17 Democrats against, and 5 Republicans and 9 Democrats not voting. These numbers are important. It's important to know that the Democrat Woodrow Wilson was against women's suffrage until it became politically expedient for him to support it. It was the Democrats that kept tanking the vote and killing the amendment, and only after the Republicans were able to overwhelm the Democrats that enough of them capitulated and voted to send it to the states for ratification. So coming full circle, should women have the right to vote? Well, personally, sure. I have no problem with that. But as I've mentioned before, I don't think all American citizens should be allowed to have their votes count, and that includes some percentage of women. As a brief review, voting was originally based on tax-paying status or property ownership. This was done to ensure that those that voted had a stake in the success of the country. There was less of a chance that those that were holding down employment, that were stable enough to own property, would be an uninformed voter or a one-issue voter, that issue, of course, being whatever's best for him, and forget everyone else. This is not a bad system, and that could be extended to all citizens as long as they meet those requirements. But then you get into the question of those working for the people they're voting for. There's absolutely a conflict of interest here. So do we just disenfranchise all those that are paid their wages through the state or the Fed? Well, yes, we should, but that's also not a great answer. My solution, as I've said before, would be to put a test at the beginning of the ballot. Now, I've said before, a 20-question test or something like that. After giving it a little bit more thought, I kind of think it should be longer, more comprehensive. Regardless, the test should be comprised of basic civics. Do you understand who America is, the founding and the history, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution? And then there should be a section regarding the current status of the election. What are the major topics? What politically important current events are going on? Do you have any idea who the candidates are beyond name recognition? So you take your test, you finish the test, then you vote. If you passed, your vote counts. Male, female, black or white, rich or poor, private sector, public sector, and I would argue even children could vote. In my opinion, if you'd understand what's going on, your vote counts. If you didn't pass the test, your vote is discarded, and none of us ever know. The fact that there would be a test would weed out the lazy. The test would weed out the ignorant. Those that care would actually vote. Of course, the dead would still vote Democrat, but that's pretty much a given. So should women vote? Yeah, I think so. Should women be able to look at the men of this country and not feel they need to vote because the men are striving to be like Christ and lead their families and lead their country in the most Christ-like direction? Yeah, they should be able to do that, but here we are. And that is the 19th Amendment. After years of being denied the right to vote by Democrats, the Democrats, now as they do with the black population, pander to women to try to woo their vote. And they're pretty successful. Women across all ages tend to vote from 10 to 22% more for Democrats than they do for Republicans. I'm pretty confident I know why, too. Women were designed by God as generally being more emotional. Men are generally more logical. I know, these are generalizations, not hard rules, but generally this is correct. The men in the Democrat Party are generally farther on the emotional side of the scale. Think of COVID, for example. What did Biden do in the debates? And it was mimicked by all of his cronies, and we're talking besides drool or stumble, which, to be honest, was actually mimicked by a lot of his cronies as well. We think about the people in the House and the Senate. Anyway, he talked about the empty chairs at the kitchen table. He talked about getting grandma sick. He hit the emotional topics. Republicans, and side note here, Trump frankly was a disaster regarding the COVID response. And I'll give him the first few months to figure it out even. And after that, his domestic policies and guidance was just hot garbage. But Republicans in general were driven by data, statistics, and probabilities. those don't tend to tug at the heartstrings as much as dead grandma. So you have a party made up of women and emotional men making logic-deficient arguments that hit you right in the feels about fairness and love and compassion, and women in general empathize with the messaging and vote for them. You'll find that the women that vote for Republicans may have a higher emotional component than men, which they should, but they tend to have a higher aptitude for logic as well. Think about who you know. You'll see that I'm correct. And if I'm not correct, don't tell me. It'll hurt my feelings and I'll cry because I'll know that you don't love me anymore, and I just don't think my fragile heart could take that kind of rejection. How'd I do? So the Democrats, like the emotional manipulating gaslighters they are, first want to exclude everyone that's, not them, and then they want to figure out how to manipulate and use them for their own evil purposes. Pretty diabolical, really, when you look at it. This is what they've done with blacks, with women, with the LGBT community, with emotionally immature children, with illegal aliens, and pretty much any group they can get their little talons in. If we could ever get their playbook into fresh air, out into the sunlight, I think people would be very upset about how they've been used, literally just used, in order to keep them in power and control, and also to increase their bank accounts. Anyway, that'll bring this episode of the American Genesis to a close. In the next episode, and you'll never guess this, we'll look at the next amendment. And actually possibly the next two or maybe even 3 amendments. It looks like we got a couple that are, let's say of lesser substance, maybe. But we'll see. As I research these things, I'm surprised every time by the background. But that's for the next episode. And hey, I was all ready to throw down some feminist slogans and quotes and make some sexist, misogynistic jokes, and I think I did pretty good here. But just a few. I had them pulled up anyway. Never restrict a woman. She can do everything like a man. My name in the snow says that that's not true. Girls just want to have fun. Demental human rights. Clever girl. Only weak men fear strong women. This one I'm not really sure on. Can someone define woman for me? Women belong in places where decisions are being made. Oh, I totally agree with that, sure. Orders need to be taken, glasses refilled, stuff like that. Sorry. Look, you can't put the ball on the tee without expecting someone to take a swing at it, okay? Women bring all voters into the world. Let women vote. Okay, so not all women do that. And how is performing a natural function a qualification to vote? Feminism is a radical notion that women are people. Right, so the Word of God told us about women being people a couple thousand years ago. Feminism is actually the radical notion that women are better people and don't need men, which is stupid. Here's a nice rhyme. Not the church, not the state. Women will decide their fate. Well, both of those things are wrong. The state does actually dictate law, and maybe not the church, but the owner of the church, God, kind of decides all our fates, and it has nothing to do with how much you read about things. And possibly my favorite quote that I found in my searching, quote, "The feminists hate me, don't they? And I don't blame them, for I hate feminism. It is a poison." Now, who said this? Former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and woman, Margaret Thatcher. And with that, until next time. Well, we've reached the end of another episode of the Logical Christian Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, review, share, and all that podcasty stuff. Contact information can be found in the show notes if you'd like to reach out to me. Lawrence J. Peters said, "Against logic, there is no armor like ignorance." Jesus told us that if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So stay in the word, stay logical, stay faithful, and until next time, God bless.
Hello. How y'all doing?
Hey, Doctor Now. I'm hanging in there, can't complain.
What in the world is going on with you?
Oh, nothing. Just sticking with the diet. Oh, I'm so hungry. I practically eat nothing.
What are you talking about? You're choosing to overeat and you think it's okay?
Oh, no. I'm serious. I'm really working hard, Doctor Now.
For some reason you think if you just hold to your lie, then maybe all these issues just magically will go away and you will lose weight.
No, I think I'm doing just fine.
Really?
Well, I thought I was. Look, I don't know what's going on.
Your weight loss is going to be dictated by how many calories you take.
Right.
and how many calories you spent.
Right.
And if you don't understand that, we're not going to make any progress.
No, I mean, that makes perfect sense, but I think it's a lot of water weight, though. You know, if I'm being completely and totally honest with you, I mean, it's just a lot of water retention weight.
You keep going back, saying the same thing. Right. Water weight, I know.
Yeah.
Get over that, okay? That's not reality, okay? That's a mistake, okay? None of your tests show that you're retaining water, okay? You know you're not doing what you need.
Well, okay. I mean, look, I might be sneaking just a little bit here or there, right? I mean, right?
You think it's funny?
Oh.
And if you sneak food even once, we are done. You understand me?
Oh, yeah. No, I get it. But really, I mean, I'm not eating very much at all, really, when you look at it.
And you claim that you're not eating very much, really? So if you eat less, you lose weight, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, sounds right.
You're not losing weight, so you're not eating less, right?
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, well, your logic is sound. I'll give you that.
So things don't look good at all.
Oh.
And I'm not interested in any more excuses or games from you.
Okay, well, I mean, I didn't think they looked that terrible. I mean, I'm not trying to play any games or anything here.
Put forth some effort, and you'll be amazed the progress you make. Trust me.
Okay, well, yeah, will do. Look, no more excuses, more effort. Got it. Oof. Oh, sorry you had to hear that. It's a little brutal. So last week started good. It seriously did, but it kind of fell apart by the end of the week. But at the same time, I was able to spend a little time with the kid, and that, with her being a teen with a boyfriend, is tough to come by these days. So I will cherish what I get. So Friday, we went to Five Guys. Yeah, I know. But I got my annual bonus from work, so I only had to take a little bit out of savings in addition to that so that we could afford it. And then, well, I mean, you know, large bowls of buttery, salty popcorn is one of my weaknesses. So, you know, I had one of those on Saturday, I think it was. And then Sunday after church, the kid and I went to the mall because she needed a dress. I mean, you didn't think that we went to the mall because I wanted to go, did you? Oof. And then we went to watch the new movie Nefarious. Now, Rabbit Trail, although some of the theology is a little wonky, this Christian movie that doesn't look like what we all think of when someone says, hey, let's go to a Christian movie, it was actually pretty good, and it raises some interesting questions. The kid loved it. She said it was one of her favorites of all time, and we had a really good discussion after it, so win-win, right? But back to my failure. You can't go to the movies without getting yet more popcorn, and that's pretty salty, so you need a movie-sized box of sweetness in the form of Butterfinger Bites to chase the popcorn, right? I had a Coke Zero, though, so we're all good there. Anyway, as of Tuesday, I was up 0.6 pounds from last week to a mass of 191.2 pounds. Still ahead of my goal pace, but we're closing in fast. Now, that said, I think my system just hadn't purged yet. As Wednesday, when I weighed in, I had lost 2.2 pounds overnight, and Thursday, I was down another 2.2 pounds, which is totally realistic and definitely repeatable. Bottom line, I have no idea where I am, or what I'll be next week, but I'm trying, I think, right, or something. I also didn't work out more than, it was once or twice last week, but I did a lot of work outside. I'm digging up and fixing a fence. I'm working on cars. I got the four-wheeler running correctly for the first time in a couple years. So it's not like I've just been sitting around. And, boy, working outside really, it kind of works up a different kind of hungry. You know what I'm saying? Now, calories were definitely up. Somewhere around maybe average 2,000 per day. And they should be more in the 1,500 to 1,600 range. So that wasn't good. But overall, really not too much damage, and maybe next week will pull me out of this nosedive. I don't know. As of now, well, this be a nice deep dark red color. Now, other than that, I'm fairly happy with the past week. Looking at book reading, I added another 191 pages, not quite the same pace as the last couple weeks, but definitely a solid showing. I finished up my lighter, easier books, whatever you want to call them, and started the next light book and the next deep book as well. Now, the book I wrapped up is entitled Pieces of Light by Julie Cave. This is actually the third book in what was originally a 3-book series, but then was stretched to 4, about a woman named Dinah Harris. This is a Christian crime, drama, thriller type book series, and I'll be honest, really, really good. It's been a while since I read books 1 and 2, and I guess I got sidetracked on other things, and number 3 and 4 have been on the shelf for a while. Well, this one at 300 pages long, it took me about 6 days to get through, and that's with my schedule. I could easily see someone pounding this one out in a day. It's written really well, and the action is fantastic. You want to start with book 1, though. Work your way from there all the way through, since it follows the one main character. You definitely want to follow her character arc. You don't want to just jump into the middle of this. So, with those nearly 200 pages, I officially crossed over the 200% of my goal pace mark at a 204% even, and that's a total of 2,448 pages for the year so far, with a goal of 3,600, so this one stays a nice solid green. Bible reading was a little bit off this week, but whereas I normally read about 10 days worth in the daily Bible, I was only able to get 7, which incidentally is the same number of days there is in an actual week. I mean, who knew, right? But since I slowed the pace a little, my percentage of pace went down slightly, but I'm still at 155.9% of my goal pace. That's still moving along nicely and staying a nice solid green. Finally, devotions. Another solid week there. It's now the first thing I do after I wake up enough to at least be aware. I grab the little devotional, pull up the Bible app, and knock out about a 5 to 10 minute devotion, depending on how much supplemental reading is on that particular day. So that one edges slightly up again, now sitting at 123.1%. We don't want to forget that, percent of goal pace, and that will also stay a nice solid green. And that's it. Overall, even with the slight gain, maybe or maybe not in weight, I don't know. It's all based on life choices that were made during the previous week. Well, I'll take it. I'll take the week. Of course, I don't really have an option. I can't go backward in time and redo the week, so of course I'll take it. Now, to get this diet and exercise thing back under control. If I were only independently wealthy and naturally ripped, that would solve some problems. Probably. Okay, bye.